Success isn't just about working harder, it's about understanding the invisible laws that govern wealth and achievement. What if I told you that every person who has ever built lasting prosperity followed the same fundamental principles, whether they knew it or not? The secrets aren't hidden in some vault, they're right in front of us, waiting to be understood and applied. Roger Ward Babson spent decades studying what separates those who thrive from those who merely survive, and what he discovered will change the way you think about money, work, and your own potential forever. Let me take you back to the early 20th century, when America was transforming from an agricultural society into an industrial powerhouse. Cities were growing, factories were humming, and opportunities seemed endless. Yet even in this age of expansion, most people struggled to get ahead. They worked long hours, saved what little they could, and hoped that somehow, someday, their circumstances would improve. Roger Ward Babson watched this phenomenon with the keen eye of both a businessman and a statistician. He had built his own fortune through careful analysis of economic trends, and he became obsessed with a simple question. Why do some people prosper, while others, working just as hard, remain stuck in mediocrity? Babson wasn't content with simple answers. He didn't believe prosperity was just about luck, or being in the right place at the right time, or having wealthy parents. He studied successful individuals across every industry, from manufacturing to agriculture, from banking to retail. He analyzed their habits, their decisions, their philosophies. And gradually, a pattern emerged. Prosperity, he realized, wasn't random at all. It followed laws as predictable as the law of gravity. Just as an apple falls down and never up, certain principles always led to wealth and success, while violating those principles always led to failure. The problem was that most people had never learned these laws, and so they stumbled through life, making the same mistakes over and over again. The first and most fundamental law Babson identified is the law of service. This isn't some abstract philosophical concept, it's the bedrock of all economic success. Every dollar you earn, every bit of prosperity you build, comes from providing value to other people. Think about it carefully. When you receive a paycheck, it's because you performed services that someone else found valuable enough to pay for. When a business makes a profit, it's because customers chose to purchase its products or services, rather than keep their money or spend it elsewhere. The marketplace is essentially a giant voting system, where people vote with their dollars for the things they find most useful, most enjoyable, most necessary. Now here's where most people go wrong. They think about work in terms of what they can get, rather than what they can give. They show up at their job thinking about the paycheck, counting the hours until quitting time, doing the bare minimum to avoid getting fired. But prosperity never comes to those who approach work this way. Babson tells the story of a young man he knew who worked as a clerk in a small store. This young man could have done what most clerks did, watching the clock, taking long breaks, treating customers as interruptions to his day. Instead, he approached his work completely differently. He studied the merchandise until he knew every product intimately. He learned about the customers, remembering their preferences and their families. When someone came in looking for something the store didn't carry, he didn't just say no, he found out where they could get it, even if it meant sending them to a competitor. He stayed late to organize the stockroom without being asked. He suggested new products and better display arrangements to the owner. What happened to this young clerk? Within 2 years, the owner made him a partner. Within 5 years, he owned his own store. Within 10 years, he owned a chain of stores and had become one of the wealthiest merchants in his region. Did he work harder than other clerks? Perhaps slightly, but the real difference wasn't in the quantity of effort. It was in the mentality. He understood the law of service. He knew that the way to prosper was to make himself so valuable that prosperity would seek him out. The universe operates on a principle of reciprocity. You cannot receive more than you give, at least not for long. Those who try to get something for nothing, whether through deception, manipulation, or mere laziness, may succeed temporarily, but they always fail in the end. The law of service is as reliable as mathematics. This principle applies at every level, from the individual worker to the largest corporation. Companies that focus obsessively on providing better products and better service inevitably outperform those that focus primarily on extracting profits. Henry Ford didn't become wealthy by trying to squeeze every penny from his customers. He became wealthy by figuring out how to make automobiles so efficiently that he could sell them at prices ordinary people could afford. In doing so, he provided tremendous service. He gave millions of people access to personal transportation that transformed their lives, and the wealth flowed back to him as a natural consequence. But the law of service is only the beginning. Babson identified a second fundamental principle, what he called the law of economy. Now, when most people hear the word economy, they think about penny pinching and deprivation, living on beans and rice, denying themselves every pleasure. That's not what Babson meant at all. True economy is about wisdom, about understanding the difference between investment and expense, between assets and liabilities, between wise use of resources and wasteful dissipation. Consider two young men, both earning the same salary. The first spends everything he makes. He buys an expensive car with high monthly payments, he rents a fancy apartment, he goes out to restaurants and bars several times a week, he buys the latest gadgets and fashion. At the end of each month, his bank account is empty, and he's often carrying credit card debt. He tells himself he's living well, enjoying life, that he'll worry about saving later when he's earning more. The second young man lives differently. He drives a reliable but modest car that he purchased used, paying cash. He rents a simple apartment and prepares most of his meals at home. He spends money on things that truly matter to him, like books and occasional trips, but he's ruthless about cutting expenses that don't add real value to his life. Most importantly, he saves and invests at least 20% of his income, every single month without fail. Fast forward 10 years. The first young man, despite probably earning more than he did initially, is still living paycheck to paycheck. He has no savings, no investments, no financial security. One unexpected expense, a medical bill or a car repair, throws his life into chaos. The second young man has accumulated a substantial investment portfolio. The compound growth on his savings has begun to work its magic. Earning returns that themselves earn returns, he has options. If he wants to start a business, he has the capital. If he wants to change careers, he has a cushion. If an opportunity arises, he has the resources to seize it. More importantly, he has peace of mind. He sleeps well at night, knowing that he's not one emergency away from financial disaster. The difference between these two men isn't intelligence or opportunity. It's understanding and applying the law of economy. Babson emphasized that economy doesn't mean being cheap or miserly. A person who buys a high-quality tool that will last 20 years is practicing economy, even if it costs more upfront than a cheap tool that will break in 2 years. A person who invests in education that increases their earning power is practicing economy. Economy is about getting the maximum value from your resources, about making your money work for you rather than just passing through your hands. There's a story Babson loved to tell about a farmer he knew. This farmer wasn't the wealthiest in the county, but he was comfortable and secure, while many of his neighbors struggled despite working just as hard. The secret? This farmer understood economy in its deepest sense. When other farmers bought new equipment on credit every few years, he maintained his equipment meticulously, making it last decades. When others threw away spoiled hay or wasted grain, he figured out systems to minimize waste. When others sold all their crops immediately after harvest when prices were low, he built storage facilities so he could sell later when prices rose. Small efficiencies, multiplied across years and decades, created substantial prosperity. But Babson also warned against false economy, the kind of penny-wise, pound-foolish thinking that actually undermines prosperity. He told of a business owner who refused to invest in training for his employees because it seemed like an unnecessary expense. As a result, his workers made costly mistakes, his customer service was poor, and his best employees left for competitors who invested in their development. The money he saved on training cost him 10 times as much in lost business and turnover. True economy requires wisdom to distinguish between necessary investments and wasteful expenses. The third fundamental law Babson identified is the law of reliability. Your reputation, your word, your consistency, these are among your most valuable assets, and unlike material possessions, they can never be taken from you by force. only surrendered by your own actions. In a world where trust is rare, the person who can be counted on absolutely, who delivers what they promise when they promise it, who tells the truth even when it's difficult, who stands by their commitments even when circumstances change, this person becomes extraordinarily valuable. Babson observed that successful people almost universally had reputations for absolute reliability. When they said they would do something, it got done. When they made an agreement, they honored it, even if circumstances changed, and honoring it became expensive or inconvenient. This reliability created a form of currency more valuable than gold. People wanted to do business with reliable individuals. They extended credit to them, offered them opportunities, recommended them to others. Meanwhile, people who were unreliable, who made promises they didn't keep, who delivered shoddy work, who made excuses, found that opportunities dried up. They might succeed through deception once or twice, but word got around and eventually no one wanted to deal with them. Let me share a story that illustrates this principle perfectly. In a certain city, there were two contractors who built houses. The first contractor was cheaper, he gave the lowest bids, and he promised the fastest completion times. But homeowners who hired him soon learned to regret it. He used substandard materials when he thought he could get away with it. His workers cut corners. Projects that were supposed to take 3 months dragged on for 6 or 9. When problems arose, he made excuses and blamed others. Yes, his houses were cheap, but they were poorly built, and dealing with him was a nightmare of stress and disappointment. The second contractor charged more, and his estimated timelines were longer, but homeowners who hired him had a completely different experience. He used quality materials, his workers were skilled and professional, and he supervised the work carefully. When he said a project would be done on a certain date, it was done on that date or early. If any problems arose, he fixed them immediately without argument. His houses were beautiful, solidly built, and his clients were delighted. Now, which contractor do you think prospered more? The first contractor might have had more clients initially, attracted by his low prices, but his referrals dried up. Every job generated complaints rather than recommendations. His business eventually failed. The second contractor's business grew steadily year after year. His satisfied clients recommended him to friends and family. He could charge premium prices because people knew his work was worth it. He built a thriving business that eventually employed dozens of people and made him wealthy. The law of reliability extends beyond just keeping promises. It's about being consistent, being the kind of person others can count on. It means showing up on time, every time. It means doing quality work, even when no one is watching. It means being honest, even when dishonesty would be profitable in the short term. Babson emphasized that reliability is a habit that must be cultivated deliberately. It's easy to be reliable when it's convenient. The true test is whether you remain reliable when it's difficult. When keeping your word costs you something. When circumstances have changed and you wish you hadn't made the commitment. People who pass this test, who remain reliable even in adversity, build reputations that become their greatest assets. There's a deeper aspect to reliability that Babson explored, which is reliability to yourself. Many people are more reliable to others than they are to themselves. They keep promises to their boss or their clients, but they constantly break promises to themselves. They say they're going to wake up early and exercise, but they hit the snooze button. They say they're going to save money, but they overspend. They say they're going to learn a new skill, but they never get around to it. This self-unreliability is devastating to prosperity because it undermines your own confidence and discipline. How can you build a successful life if you can't even keep commitments to yourself? Babson urged people to start small, make small promises to yourself, and keep them absolutely. Build the habit of self-reliability and watch how it transforms not just your character, but your results. The fourth fundamental law is the law of energy and enthusiasm. Babson noticed that successful people almost always possessed unusual levels of energy and enthusiasm for their work. They didn't just go through the motions, they attacked their tasks with vigor and genuine interest. This energy was contagious. It inspired others. It overcame obstacles. It found solutions where others saw only problems. Conversely, people who approached work with lethargy and dread, who constantly complained about their circumstances, who went through life with an attitude of resigned misery, never seemed to prosper no matter how intelligent or talented they might be. Now, you might be thinking, that's easy to say, but what if I don't feel enthusiastic about my work? What if my job is boring or difficult? Babson anticipated this objection, and his response is profound. Enthusiasm, he argued, is not something you wait to feel. It's something you choose to generate. It's a discipline, a skill, a habit that can be developed. The most successful people don't wait until they feel enthusiastic. They decide to bring enthusiasm to whatever they're doing, and the feeling follows the action. He told the story of a woman who worked as a secretary in a law office. She found the work tedious, typing the same kinds of legal documents over and over, filing papers, answering phones. She could have approached this work with resentment and boredom, watching the clock and counting the days until retirement. Instead, she made a conscious decision to find interest in her work. She began studying the legal documents she typed, learning what they meant and how they were used. She organized the filing system more efficiently, saving the attorney's time. She learned about the law firm's clients and their cases so she could be more helpful when they called. She brought energy and enthusiasm to tasks that others would have found dull. What happened? The attorneys noticed. They began asking her opinion on things. They sent her to paralegal courses. Within a few years, she had become an indispensable part of the firm, earning far more than a typical secretary. Eventually, she went to law school at night while continuing to work, and she became an attorney herself. Her enthusiasm hadn't just made her work more pleasant, it had literally transformed her career and her life. The work hadn't changed, she had changed, and that made all the difference. Babson was fascinated by the relationship between enthusiasm and energy. He observed that people who were enthusiastic seemed to have unlimited energy, while people who were unenthusiastic were constantly tired and lethargic. This wasn't coincidence, it was cause and effect. Enthusiasm generates energy. When you're genuinely interested in what you're doing, when you approach tasks with eagerness rather than dread, you find reserves of energy you didn't know you had. Hours pass quickly. Challenges become interesting puzzles rather than burdensome obstacles, and you accomplish far more than you thought possible. The opposite is equally true. When you approach work with resentment or apathy, everything becomes exhausting. Simple tasks feel overwhelming. Time crawls. You're tired all the time, not because the work is physically demanding, but because fighting your own resistance and negativity drains your energy. Babson urged people to understand this principle deeply. Your attitude toward your work determines not just your happiness, but your effectiveness and ultimately your prosperity. Two people doing the exact same job, one with enthusiasm and one without, will have completely different results. The enthusiastic person will learn faster, work more efficiently, solve problems more creatively, build better relationships, and advance further. But how do you generate enthusiasm, especially if you're stuck in a situation that genuinely isn't ideal? Babson offered several strategies. First, find something, anything, about your work that you can appreciate. Maybe it's learning a skill. Maybe it's helping people. Maybe it's the satisfaction of doing something well. Maybe it's the colleagues you work with. Focus on that positive aspect and let it grow. Second, bring excellence to whatever you're doing. There's satisfaction in doing even simple tasks with exceptional quality. Third, look for ways to improve things. Ask yourself, how could this be done better? What problems could I solve? Taking initiative and seeing improvements happen because of your efforts generates natural enthusiasm. Fourth, remember that your current situation is temporary. Even if you don't love your job, you can love the fact that it's providing you with resources and experience that will enable you to create something better. Enthusiasm for where you're going can fuel energy for what you're doing now. The fifth fundamental law Babson identified is the law of cooperation. No one achieves significant prosperity alone. Every success story involves cooperation with others, people working together toward common goals, individuals contributing their unique talents and efforts to create something greater than any could accomplish alone. Understanding this law and becoming skilled at cooperation is essential for prosperity. Babson observed that people fail to cooperate for several reasons. Sometimes it's simple selfishness, wanting all the credit or all the rewards. Sometimes it's pride, believing you can do everything better yourself. Sometimes it's fear, worrying that cooperating will somehow diminish you or that others will take advantage. But these attitudes, while common, are fundamentally mistaken. The most successful people are almost always exceptional cooperators. They build strong teams. They share credit generously. They recognize and utilize the talents of others. They understand that helping others succeed is one of the most reliable paths to their own success. There's a beautiful illustration of this in the business world. In the early days of American industry, there were two competing philosophies. Some business leaders believed in cutthroat competition, crushing rivals, hoarding information, taking advantage of employees and customers whenever possible. Others believed in cooperation, in treating employees well, in fair dealing with customers and even competitors, in sharing knowledge and building industry together. Over time, a pattern emerged. The cutthroat competitors might succeed spectacularly in the short term, but their success rarely lasted. Employees left, customers eventually rebelled, and they made enemies who worked to undermine them. Meanwhile, those who practiced cooperation built enduring businesses. Their employees were loyal and productive. Their customers returned again and again, and even their competitors often became collaborators when mutual benefit was possible. Babson told of two farmers whose land adjoined. The first farmer saw his neighbor as competition. When his neighbor asked to borrow a tool, he refused. When his neighbor's fence needed repair and some of his livestock had wandered onto the first farmer's land, he impounded them and demanded fees. He gossiped about his neighbor and took satisfaction in any misfortune that befell him. The second farmer saw things differently. When his neighbor needed help, he provided it. When his neighbor succeeded, he celebrated with him. When problems arose between them, he sought fair solutions. He shared knowledge about farming techniques and market conditions. Now, who do you think prospered more? The first farmer lived in constant conflict and stress. Other neighbors saw how he behaved and kept their distance. When he needed help, none came. His bitterness poisoned his life even as his crops grew. The cooperative farmer, meanwhile, lived in a community of mutual support. When his barn burned down, neighbors came from miles around to help rebuild it. When he needed extra hands at harvest, people volunteered. When he fell ill one year, his neighbors tended his fields without being asked. His life was not just more prosperous materially, but richer in every way. The law of cooperation extends to family life as well. Families where members cooperate, where parents and children work together, where household responsibilities are shared, where people support each other's goals and dreams. These families are happier and more prosperous than families characterized by conflict and selfishness. A husband and wife who cooperate, who support each other's ambitions, who work as a team toward common goals, will achieve far more together than they ever could separately or in conflict. Children who learn cooperation in the home carry that skill into their adult lives, where it serves them enormously. Babson also emphasized that cooperation doesn't mean weakness or abandoning your own interests. True cooperation is based on mutual benefit and respect. It means being willing to work with others when doing so serves everyone's interests, not becoming a doormat or allowing yourself to be exploited. The cooperative person sets clear boundaries, communicates honestly, and expects fair treatment while extending the same to others. This kind of principled cooperation is entirely compatible with strength and self-respect. The sixth fundamental law is the law of truth and integrity. Babson believed this was perhaps the most important principle of all, because violating it undermines everything else. Prosperity built on deception is a house built on sand. It will inevitably collapse. Only prosperity built on truth and integrity can last. This doesn't just mean avoiding outright lies, though certainly that's part of it. It means conducting yourself with rigorous honesty in all your dealings. It means being truthful even when the truth is inconvenient or costly. It means keeping your word, dealing fairly, refusing to deceive or manipulate even when you could get away with it. Why is this so important? For several reasons. First, deception creates complexity and anxiety. When you lie or manipulate, you have to remember what you said to whom, maintain false appearances, live in fear of being discovered. This is exhausting and stressful. Living with integrity is simpler and more peaceful. You never have to remember lies because you told the truth. You never have to worry about being exposed because there's nothing to expose. Second, Deception destroys relationships and reputation. You might fool people once, but eventually they figure it out, and once trust is lost, it's nearly impossible to regain. Third, deception corrupts character. Each compromise with truth makes the next one easier, until you've become the kind of person you would have despised when you were young. Fourth, and most practically, deception usually backfires. The short-term gain almost never outweighs the long-term cost. Babson shared the story of a merchant who sold goods of varying quality. When wealthy, knowledgeable customers came in, he sold them his best merchandise at fair prices. But when poor or ignorant customers came in, he sold them inferior goods while claiming they were high quality, and he overcharged them. He justified this by telling himself that these customers didn't know the difference, and he needed to make a profit. For a while, this strategy seemed to work. He made good money, but gradually, word spread about his dishonest practices. People in the community began warning each other about him. Customers started going to his competitors, even if it meant traveling farther or paying slightly more, because they knew they would be treated honestly. The merchant's business declined and eventually failed entirely. He had chosen short-term profit over long-term prosperity, deception over integrity, and he paid the price. Contrast this with another merchant in the same town who operated on completely different principles. He treated every customer the same, whether rich or poor, knowledgeable or ignorant. He sold quality goods at fair prices, and he was absolutely honest about what he was selling. If something had a defect, he pointed it out and reduced the price accordingly. If he thought a customer was about to make a purchase, they would regret. He told them so even if it cost him a sale. This merchant's customers trusted him completely. They sent their friends and family to him. They remained loyal for decades. His business grew steadily, and he became prosperous and respected. The irony was that his honesty, which sometimes cost him individual sales, actually made him far more money in the long run than the dishonest merchant's deceptive practices. Babson also emphasized that integrity means being honest with yourself, not just with others. Self-deception is perhaps even more dangerous than deceiving others because it prevents you from seeing problems clearly and making necessary changes. If you're failing at something, you need to admit it honestly so you can figure out why and what to do differently. If you have a weakness or a bad habit, you need to acknowledge it rather than making excuses. The person who can look at themselves with brutal honesty, seeing both strengths and weaknesses clearly, is far better positioned to improve and succeed than the person who constantly lies to themselves about their situation. Living with integrity does sometimes require sacrifice. There will be moments when dishonesty would be profitable, when a lie would solve a problem, when deception would be easy and seemingly harmless. In those moments, choosing integrity feels costly. But Babson urged people to take the long view. The cost of dishonesty, even when it's not immediately apparent, always exceeds the cost of honesty. The peace of mind, the clear conscience, the strong relationships, the solid reputation, the good character that come from living with integrity are worth more than any amount of money gained through deception. The seventh fundamental law Babson identified is the law of health and vitality. Your physical and mental health is foundational to everything else. You cannot build prosperity if you're constantly sick, exhausted, or mentally unwell. Babson observed that successful people almost universally took care of their health. They weren't necessarily athletes or health fanatics, but they understood that their body and mind were tools they needed to maintain in good working order. This means several things practically. First, taking care of your body through reasonable eating habits. Babson wasn't advocating for any particular diet or extreme restriction, but he noted that people who ate excessive amounts of unhealthy food, who drank too much alcohol, who abused substances, invariably paid a price in reduced energy, poor health, and shortened lifespan. Meanwhile, people who ate moderately and healthfully had more energy, clearer thinking, and greater longevity. Second, getting adequate sleep. Babson observed that many people sabotaged themselves by sleeping too little, trying to squeeze more hours out of the day. But the hours they gained were filled with foggy thinking, poor decisions, and reduced productivity. The person who sleeps well accomplishes more in fewer hours than the sleep-deprived person manages in many more. Third, engaging in regular physical activity. The human body is designed for movement, and people who sit all day inevitably experience reduced health and vitality. Regular exercise, even something as simple as daily walking, pays enormous dividends in energy, health, and longevity. Mental health is equally important. Babson lived before modern psychology, but he understood intuitively what we now know scientifically, that mental and emotional well-being profoundly affect success and prosperity. People who are constantly anxious, depressed, or stressed cannot think clearly or act effectively. Learning to manage stress, maintain emotional equilibrium, and cultivate positive mental states is a crucial skill for prosperity. This might involve practices like meditation, prayer, time in nature, creative hobbies, or simply regular relaxation. It definitely involves learning to let go of resentments, worries, and negative thoughts that drain energy without producing any benefit. Babson told of a businessman he knew who worked incredibly hard, often 16 hours a day, neglecting sleep, exercise, and recreation. He was successful by conventional measures, making good money and growing his business. But he was constantly stressed, frequently sick, and miserable. One day he collapsed from exhaustion and illness. During his forced recovery, he had time to reflect on his life and realized he needed to change. When he returned to work, he did so differently. He worked reasonable hours, exercised daily, took real vacations, and made time for family and hobbies. His business partners worried that his reduced hours would hurt the business, but the opposite happened. Because he was healthier and more energized, his judgment improved, his creativity increased, and his productivity per hour actually rose. The business continued to grow, but now he was actually enjoying his life rather than sacrificing everything to work. The law of health also reminds us that prosperity isn't just about accumulating money. What good is wealth if you're too sick to enjoy it, too exhausted to use it, too stressed to appreciate it? True prosperity includes health, energy, and well-being. The person who has moderate wealth but excellent health, strong relationships, and peace of mind is far more prosperous than the person who has great wealth but poor health, broken relationships, and constant anxiety. Babson urged people to define prosperity holistically and to make choices that support all aspects of well-being, not just financial accumulation. The eighth fundamental law is the law of perseverance. Success rarely comes quickly or easily. There will be setbacks, obstacles, failures, and discouragements. The difference between those who ultimately succeed and those who fail is often simply that the successful ones kept going. They persevered through difficulties that caused others to quit. They maintained effort over years and decades, not just weeks or months. They understood that building real prosperity is a marathon, not a sprint. Babson observed that people often quit right before they would have succeeded. They work toward a goal, encounter obstacles, become discouraged, and give up, not realizing that they were perhaps just one more effort away from breakthrough. He compared this to gold mining. A miner might dig through tons of rock without finding gold, become discouraged, and abandon the mine. Then someone else comes along, digs just a few feet further, and strikes a rich vein. The first miner did most of the work, but got no reward because he didn't persevere. The second miner got the reward because he kept going just a little further. There's a story that perfectly illustrates this principle. A young man decided to start a business selling a product he believed in. He invested his savings, worked incredibly hard, and was certain he would succeed. The first year was difficult, but he remained optimistic. The second year was even harder. Sales were slow and he was running out of money. The third year was devastating. He went into debt. His family pressured him to quit, and he lay awake at night wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. He was ready to give up. But something in him, call it stubbornness or faith or refusal to accept defeat, kept him going. He tried new strategies, he improved his product, he learned from every failure. The fourth year, something shifted. Sales began to increase. Customers who had bought once came back and brought friends. The business turned profitable. By the fifth year, it was thriving. By the 10th year, he had become wealthy. Years later, he said the most important decision he ever made was to keep going when everything in him wanted to quit. Perseverance doesn't mean stupidly continuing with something that's clearly not working. That's not perseverance, that's obstinacy. True perseverance means being committed to a worthy goal while remaining flexible about methods. If one approach isn't working, you try a different approach, but you don't abandon the goal. You learn from failures, adjust your strategy, and keep moving forward. Babson emphasized that virtually every successful person has a history of failures and setbacks. What made them successful wasn't avoiding failure, it was refusing to be defeated by failure. The law of perseverance also applies to personal development and character building. Changing habits, developing new skills, and improving yourself takes sustained effort over time. Many people start enthusiastically with new resolutions or goals, but quit when progress seems slow or when they encounter difficulty. The person who perseveres, who keeps practicing a skill even when improvement seems imperceptible, who keeps working on a habit even after setbacks, who maintains effort through the boring middle period when enthusiasm has faded, but success hasn't yet arrived, this person inevitably succeeds. Small efforts, consistently applied over long periods, produce remarkable results. This is the power of perseverance. Babson also noted that perseverance becomes easier when you have a compelling purpose, a reason for your efforts that goes beyond mere personal gain. The person who is working just to get rich may quit when the going gets tough, because their motivation is shallow. But the person who believes deeply in what they're doing, who feels they're serving some larger purpose or creating something meaningful, finds resources of perseverance they didn't know they had. When you know your why, you can endure almost anyhow. The ninth fundamental law is the law of learning and growth. The world is constantly changing, and standing still means falling behind. Prosperity comes to those who are constantly learning, growing, adapting, and improving. Babson observed that successful people were invariably learners, reading widely, seeking new knowledge, learning from every experience and every person they encountered. Meanwhile, people who stopped learning, who thought they already knew everything they needed to know, who were unwilling to consider new ideas or change their methods, gradually became obsolete and less valuable. This principle is even more relevant today than when Babson wrote. Technology and knowledge advance so rapidly that skills which were valuable a decade ago may be obsolete now. Industries transform, new opportunities emerge, and old ways of doing things become inefficient. The person who continues learning and adapting thrives in this environment. The person who refuses to learn new things, who clings to old methods, who resists change, struggles increasingly as the world moves on without them. But learning isn't just about formal education or technical skills, though those are certainly valuable. It's about cultivating a mindset of curiosity and openness. It's about learning from every experience, even failures and difficulties. It's about learning from every person you meet, recognizing that everyone knows something you don't. It's about reading, observing, questioning, experimenting, and reflecting. The person who approaches life as a perpetual student, always curious and always willing to learn, has an enormous advantage over those who think they've already learned everything important. Babson told of a mechanic who worked in the early days of automobiles. This mechanic could have focused only on learning about the specific makes and models popular in his era, but he was fascinated by how things worked and constantly sought to understand new developments. He read technical journals, he experimented with new tools and methods, he attended demonstrations of new technologies. When automobile technology began advancing rapidly, he wasn't left behind because he had cultivated the habit of learning. He adapted to each new development, and his expertise remained valuable throughout his career. Meanwhile, other mechanics who had simply learned one set of skills and stopped growing found their knowledge becoming increasingly obsolete. The law of learning also emphasizes learning from mistakes and failures. Every setback contains lessons if you're willing to learn them. The person who fails at something and simply blames circumstances or other people learns nothing and is likely to fail again in the same way. But the person who asks, "What can I learn from this? What would I do differently next time? What does this teach me about myself or about how things work?" This person transforms failure into education. Over time, the cumulative wisdom gained from learning from mistakes becomes invaluable. Babson also emphasized learning from successful people. One of the fastest ways to advance is to study those who have already achieved what you're trying to achieve and learn from their example. This doesn't mean copying them exactly, because circumstances differ and what worked for them might not work for you exactly the same way. But it means understanding the principles they applied, the mindset they brought, the strategies they used, and then adapting those lessons to your own situation. Reading biographies and autobiographies of successful people, having mentors, studying companies and industries that prosper, all of these are forms of learning that can dramatically accelerate your own progress. The 10th fundamental law Babson identified is the law of faith and confidence. Success requires believing in yourself, in your goals, and in the possibility of achievement. Without faith, without confidence, you'll quit at the first obstacle. You'll never take necessary risks, and you'll sabotage yourself with doubt and fear. Babson observed that successful people almost universally possessed strong faith and confidence. This didn't mean they were arrogant or that they never experienced doubt, but they had a fundamental belief in their ability to figure things out and succeed eventually. Where does this faith and confidence come from? Partly from past successes. Building confidence is cumulative. Each small success makes the next one easier. This is why Babson encouraged people to start with achievable goals and build momentum through a series of small wins. Partly from preparation. When you've thoroughly prepared for something, when you've developed your skills and knowledge, confidence follows naturally. Partly from focusing on what you can control rather than worrying about what you can't. And partly from a deeper faith in the universe, a belief that if you do the right things, if you provide value and work with integrity, prosperity will come. Babson distinguished between false confidence, which is based on arrogance or delusion, and true confidence, which is based on competence and principle. False confidence leads people to take foolish risks, to overestimate their abilities, to ignore warning signs. True confidence makes you willing to take calculated risks, to persist through difficulties, and to believe in eventual success even when current circumstances are challenging. The confident person doesn't need guarantees. They're willing to work toward a goal even without certainty of success because they trust in their ability to handle whatever happens. Consider a young woman who dreams of starting her own business. She has two choices. She can focus on all the reasons it might not work, all the risks, all the things that could go wrong. She can listen to the voices, both external and internal, that tell her she's not ready, that she doesn't have enough money or experience or connections, that she should play it safe and stick with her current job. If she allows fear and doubt to dominate, she'll never start, and her dream will remain forever unfulfilled. Or she can choose faith and confidence. She can acknowledge the risks while believing in her ability to handle them. She can focus on her strengths and on what she can learn. She can take the leap, trusting that she'll figure things out as she goes. Which approach do you think leads to prosperity? History is filled with examples of people whose faith and confidence carried them through circumstances that would have defeated others. Thomas Edison failed thousands of times before successfully creating a practical light bulb. His faith never wavered. He simply saw each failure as learning what didn't work, bringing him closer to what would. Many of the great business empires were started by people who had nothing but an idea and an unshakable belief that they could make it work. They faced obstacles that seemed insurmountable, moments when rational analysis suggested they should quit, but their faith carried them through. Babson also noted that faith and confidence are contagious. People are drawn to those who believe in themselves and in what they're doing. Investors fund entrepreneurs who radiate confidence. Customers buy from salespeople who believe in their products. Employees work harder for leaders who have faith in their mission. Your confidence inspires confidence in others, creating a positive cycle that accelerates success. Conversely, doubt and fear repel people. If you don't believe in yourself, why should anyone else? But faith must be balanced with realism and humility. Blind faith that ignores facts or refuses to adapt to reality is not a virtue, it's foolishness. True faith is compatible with careful planning, with learning from feedback, with adjusting course when necessary. It's not about pretending problems don't exist. It's about believing you can solve them. It's not about being certain of success. It's about being willing to try despite uncertainty. The confident person faces reality clearly but believes in their ability to deal with whatever reality presents. The 11th fundamental law is the law of generosity and giving. This might seem counterintuitive. How does giving away resources lead to prosperity? But Babson observed that generous people, those who gave freely of their time, money, knowledge, and assistance, often prospered more than miserly people who hoarded everything. There are several reasons for this. First, generosity builds relationships and goodwill. When you help others, they remember and often reciprocate when you need help. You build a network of people who are invested in your success because you were invested in theirs. Second, generosity often comes back multiplied. The person you mentor might later open doors for you. The charity you support might connect you with influential people. The employee you treated generously might go on to become a valuable business partner. Third, generosity develops an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. When you give freely, you reinforce the belief that there's enough to go around, that you can afford to share. This mindset attracts opportunities that the scarcity mindset repels. Babson told of a business owner who was known for his generosity. When his employees faced hardships, he helped them. When young people in his community needed opportunities, he hired and trained them. When charitable causes needed support, he contributed. Some people thought he was foolish, that his generosity would bankrupt him, but the opposite happened. His employees were fiercely loyal and worked harder than employees at other companies. Young people he had helped became successful and sent business his way or partnered with him on ventures. His reputation for generosity attracted the best talent, the most loyal customers, and the most valuable opportunities. His business thrived not despite his generosity, but because of it. Contrast this with a wealthy man in the same town who was notoriously stingy. He paid his employees minimum wage and not a penny more. He haggled over every expense. He never contributed to charity or helped anyone unless there was clear immediate benefit to himself. He accumulated substantial wealth through his penny-pinching ways. But he was miserable and alone. His employees resented him and left for other jobs as soon as they could. People avoided him because every interaction with him was unpleasant. His wealth brought him no joy, no meaningful relationships, no real satisfaction. When he eventually died, few mourned him, and much of his fortune was consumed by estate disputes among distant relatives who had barely known him. Babson wasn't suggesting that you should give away everything, or that you should let yourself be taken advantage of. Wise generosity means giving in ways that truly help people rather than enabling destructive behaviors. It means balancing giving with the need to maintain your own resources and stability. It means being strategic and thoughtful about how you give, but within these boundaries, making generosity a regular practice enriches both your life and the lives of others, while ultimately contributing to your own prosperity. The law of generosity also includes generosity of spirit, being generous with praise, with patience, with forgiveness, with credit for successes. The person who generously acknowledges others' contributions, who praises good work, who forgives mistakes and gives people second chances, creates an environment where people thrive. This applies in families, in businesses, in communities. The generous-spirited person attracts others and brings out their best. The stingy-spirited person, who withholds praise, who is quick to criticize and slow to forgive, who takes credit for others' work, repels people and brings out their worst. The 12th fundamental law Babson emphasized is the law of purpose and vision. Prosperity rarely comes to those who drift through life without clear direction. Success requires knowing what you're working toward, having a vision of what you want to create or achieve, and maintaining purpose that guides your daily decisions and actions. Babson observed that successful people almost always had clear goals and strong sense of purpose. They knew what they wanted and why they wanted it, and this clarity gave power and direction to their efforts. Without clear purpose and vision, you're like a ship without a rudder, blown about by every wind, drifting with whatever currents happen to catch you. You might stay busy, you might work hard, but your efforts scatter in all directions rather than accumulating toward meaningful achievement. With clear purpose and vision, every effort aligns toward your goals. You make better decisions because you can evaluate choices against your vision. You maintain motivation because you know why you're working. You recognize opportunities that others miss because you're actively looking for things that advance your purpose. Babson told of two young men who graduated from college the same year with similar skills and opportunities. The first had no clear vision for his life beyond wanting to be comfortable and successful in some vague, general sense. He took a decent job, did acceptable work, made reasonable money, and lived a fine, ordinary life. There was nothing wrong with his path, but it was unremarkable. The second young man had developed a clear vision during his college years. He wanted to build a company that would revolutionize how his industry operated. He had specific ideas about what needed to change and how he would change it. He could visualize the company he wanted to create in detail. This vision guided every decision he made. He took a job specifically to learn skills he would need. He saved aggressively to accumulate capital to start his business. He spent his free time developing his ideas and building relationships with people who could help. He turned down opportunities that didn't align with his vision, even when they would have been easier or more immediately profitable. For several years, it appeared the first young man had chosen more wisely. He had a comfortable life while the second worked constantly and lived frugally. But a decade later, the second man had built his company, and it was growing rapidly. 2 decades later, he had achieved his vision and created enormous prosperity, not just for himself, but for the hundreds of people he employed and the thousands of customers he served. His clear vision and unwavering purpose had given direction and power to his efforts that scattered efforts could never achieve. Creating a compelling vision requires reflection and self-knowledge. You need to understand what you truly value, what you're passionate about, what contribution you want to make. Your vision should be specific enough to guide action, but flexible enough to adapt as you learn and circumstances change. It should inspire and motivate you, giving you reason to persevere when things get difficult. And it should be authentically yours, not just an adoption of what others expect or what society says you should want. Babson also emphasized that purpose extends beyond just personal gain. The most compelling visions include contribution to something larger than yourself. When your purpose includes serving others, solving important problems, or creating something meaningful, you tap into deeper sources of motivation and meaning. The person working solely for personal wealth might lose motivation once they've achieved basic comfort. But the person working toward a vision that includes positive impact on others, on their community, on their industry, on the world, finds that their motivation deepens rather than diminishes as they succeed. The 13th fundamental law is the law of opportunity recognition. Opportunities surround us constantly, but most people don't see them. The prosperous person develops the ability to recognize opportunities that others miss, and the courage to seize them when they appear. Babson observed that many people failed to prosper not because opportunities weren't available, but because they couldn't recognize them or were too fearful to act on them. Opportunity recognition is partly a matter of knowledge and preparation. When you deeply understand a field or industry, you can spot gaps, needs, and possibilities that novices overlook. It's partly a matter of observation and attention. While others go through life on autopilot, the opportunity-minded person stays alert, noticing changes, problems, trends, and possibilities. It's partly a matter of mindset. The person who believes opportunities exist and looks for them finds them. The person who believes opportunities are rare or reserved for others misses them even when they appear. There's a famous story about 2 shoe salesmen sent to a developing country to assess market potential. The first salesman reported back, "Terrible opportunity, no one here wears shoes." The second salesman reported, "Incredible opportunity, no one here wears shoes yet." Same situation, completely different interpretation. One saw obstacles, the other saw possibility. Which salesman do you think succeeded? Babson emphasized that opportunities often appear disguised as problems or difficulties. A shortage or inconvenience that frustrates most people represents an opportunity for someone willing to solve it. A change that threatens existing businesses creates opportunities for new businesses adapted to the change. A skill that's rare and valuable represents an opportunity for someone willing to develop that skill. The economic concept of arbitrage, buying something where it's cheap and selling where it's expensive, is essentially opportunity recognition, spotting differences that others miss and acting on them. But recognizing opportunity isn't enough. You must also have the courage to act. Many people see opportunities but talk themselves out of pursuing them. They focus on risks rather than possibilities. They wait for certainty that never comes. They hesitate until the opportunity passes. Babson noted that successful people have a bias toward action. When they spot a promising opportunity, they find a way to test it, to take a small step, to get started, even if conditions aren't perfect. They understand that waiting for the perfect moment means waiting forever. The 14th fundamental law is the law of adaptation and flexibility. While having clear vision and purpose is essential, rigidity is fatal. The world changes, circumstances shift, and strategies that worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. Prosperity comes to those who can adapt, who can adjust their methods while maintaining their principles, who can change course when necessary while staying true to their values and vision. Babson observed that many businesses failed not because their original idea was bad, but because they couldn't adapt when conditions changed. A classic example is the buggy whip manufacturers at the dawn of the automobile age. Some saw automobiles as a temporary fad and continued making buggy whips with no change to their business model. They failed completely when horse-drawn carriages disappeared. Others adapted, using their leatherworking skills and manufacturing capabilities to make automobile accessories, belts, and other products. They prospered in the new era. Same skills, different applications. The difference was adaptability. This principle applies to individuals as much as businesses. Your career path will likely not be a straight line. Industries change, technologies emerge, opportunities appear in unexpected places. The person who rigidly sticks to one narrow path regardless of changing circumstances often finds that path leads to obsolescence. But the person who stays alert to changes and willing to adapt their skills to new applications, who sees their capabilities as transferable rather than locked to one specific role, finds continued opportunity even as specific jobs or industries transform. Adaptation doesn't mean abandoning principles or constantly chasing every new trend. Babson distinguished between core principles that should remain constant and methods or applications that should adapt to circumstances. For instance, the principle of providing excellent service remains constant, but what excellent service looks like may change as customer expectations and technologies evolve. The principle of continuous learning remains constant, but what you need to learn changes as knowledge advances and opportunities shift. The most successful people Babson studied had an interesting combination of qualities. They were firmly committed to core principles and values. You could describe them as stubborn about what mattered most. But they were remarkably flexible about methods and tactics, willing to experiment, pivot, try new approaches. This combination of principled stubbornness and tactical flexibility is powerful. You maintain direction and integrity while avoiding the rigidity that leads to obsolescence. The 15th and perhaps most encompassing fundamental law is the law of balance and wholeness. Babson believed that true prosperity requires balance across all areas of life. A person who achieves great financial success but destroys their health, ruins their relationships, and loses their integrity has not achieved real prosperity. They've made a terrible trade. True prosperity includes financial security, yes, but also physical health, strong relationships, emotional well-being, intellectual growth, and spiritual or philosophical fulfillment. This is perhaps the hardest law to follow because modern life pushes us toward imbalance. It's easy to become so focused on career and financial success that everything else suffers. Or conversely, to avoid professional challenges and ambition entirely, living comfortably but never developing your full potential. Balance doesn't mean dividing your time and energy equally among all areas at every moment. Sometimes you need to focus intensely on career, or on family, or on health. But over the longer arc of your life, attention and investment should flow to all the areas that matter. Babson told of a highly successful businessman he knew who seemed to have achieved everything. His company was thriving, his wealth was substantial, he was respected in his community. But Babson noticed the man was fundamentally unhappy. His marriage was cold and distant, his children barely knew him. He had no real friendships, only business relationships. His health was deteriorating from stress and neglect. He had achieved financial prosperity, but lacked prosperity in any deeper sense. Eventually, he suffered a heart attack that forced him to reevaluate. He realized he had spent decades building financial wealth while squandering wealth of other kinds: relationships, health, peace of mind. He made major changes, reducing his work hours, investing in his marriage and children, taking care of his health, developing real friendships. Interestingly, his business continued to thrive even with his reduced hours because he was healthier, clearer thinking, and more emotionally balanced. And his life became genuinely prosperous in ways it had never been when he was focused solely on money. The law of balance reminds us to regularly step back and assess our lives holistically. Are you neglecting important areas? Is your pursuit of success in one domain causing failure in others? Are you sacrificing things that matter more for things that matter less? These questions require honest reflection and often difficult adjustments, but asking them and acting on the answers is essential for true prosperity. Balance also means balancing present and future. Some people live entirely for today, spending everything, seeking immediate gratification, with no thought for tomorrow. Others sacrifice all present enjoyment for future security, living miserably today in hopes of some distant future comfort. Neither extreme leads to true prosperity. Wisdom lies in enjoying life today while also investing in tomorrow, finding the balance that lets you live well now while building for the future. Throughout all these laws, certain themes recur: the importance of character, integrity, and principle, the power of consistent effort over time, the value of relationships and cooperation, the necessity of service to others, the wisdom of learning and adaptation. These aren't tricks or shortcuts. They're fundamental principles that govern prosperity just as surely as physical laws govern the material world. Babson believed deeply that prosperity was available to anyone willing to understand and apply these principles. You don't need special advantages or lucky breaks, though those help. You don't need genius-level intelligence or exceptional talent, though those are assets. What you need is understanding of these fundamental laws and commitment to living by them. The laws work for everyone who applies them, regardless of starting point or circumstances. Consider the immigrant who arrives in a new country with nothing but determination. They don't speak the language well, they have no money, they have no connections. By conventional wisdom, they should struggle permanently. Yet many such immigrants achieve remarkable prosperity within a generation. How? By unconsciously or consciously applying these fundamental principles. They work with incredible energy and enthusiasm, bringing service and value to whatever work they do. They practice extreme economy, saving significant portions of whatever they earn. They're absolutely reliable, showing up and doing what they promise. They cooperate with others and build relationships. They maintain integrity even when it's difficult. They persevere through obstacles that would defeat others. They continuously learn and adapt. They have clear purpose and vision of creating better lives for themselves and their families. They recognize and seize opportunities. They balance present needs with future building, and gradually, inevitably, they prosper. Meanwhile, others born with every advantage, wealth, education, connections, fail to thrive because they violate these fundamental principles. They approach work as something to be avoided rather than opportunity for service. They spend wastefully. They're unreliable. They're selfish and unable to cooperate. They cut ethical corners. They quit when things get difficult. They stop learning. They lack clear purpose. They miss opportunities right in front of them. They rigidly refuse to adapt. They live completely imbalanced lives. And they wonder why, despite all their advantages, prosperity eludes them. The beauty of understanding these fundamental laws is that they put prosperity within your control. You cannot control the economy, the actions of others, or countless other external factors. But you can control your own character and actions. You can choose to provide excellent service. You can choose to live economically and invest wisely. You can choose to be absolutely reliable. You can choose to bring energy and enthusiasm to your work. You can choose to cooperate generously with others. You can choose integrity over expediency. You can choose to persevere when things get difficult. You can choose to keep learning and growing. You can choose faith and confidence. You can choose to be generous. You can choose to develop clear purpose and vision. You can choose to recognize and seize opportunities. You can choose to adapt while maintaining principles. You can choose balance. These choices consistently made over time, inevitably lead to prosperity. Now, implementing these principles isn't always easy. You'll face moments of doubt, temptation to cut corners, times when the principled path seems harder than easier alternatives. Old habits die hard. The world often seems to reward those who cheat, who are selfish, who take shortcuts. But Babson would urge you to take the long view. The prosperity built by violating these principles is always temporary and illusory. Real, lasting prosperity comes only from aligning your life with fundamental laws. Start where you are. You don't have to master all these principles immediately. Pick one or two that resonate most strongly, or where you see the greatest need for growth in your own life. Maybe you need to work on reliability, making and keeping commitments more carefully. Maybe you need to cultivate more enthusiasm for your work. Maybe you need to practice greater economy in your spending. Maybe you need to develop clearer vision and purpose. Start there, work on it consistently, and as that principle becomes integrated into your life, add another. The compound effect of these principles is remarkable. Each one reinforces the others. As you become more reliable, people trust you with greater opportunities. As you provide better service, your value increases. As you practice economy and invest, you build resources that create options. As you bring enthusiasm to your work, your energy and effectiveness multiply. As you cooperate generously, you build networks that support your success. As you maintain integrity, you build reputation that becomes an enormous asset. As you persevere, you outlast obstacles and competitors. As you keep learning, you stay relevant and capable. As you maintain faith, you attempt things others wouldn't dare. As you give generously, you enrich your life and build goodwill. As you develop clear purpose, your efforts align toward meaningful achievement. As you recognize opportunities, you position yourself for advancement. As you adapt wisely, you remain successful despite changing circumstances. As you maintain balance, you build prosperity that's real and sustainable. This compounding effect means that changes which seem small at first eventually produce dramatic results. It's like the difference between a ship that's off course by just 1 degree. After sailing a short distance, the error is barely noticeable. But cross an ocean with that 1-degree error, and you'll miss your destination by hundreds of miles. Similarly, consistently applying these principles creates small advantages that compound into enormous differences over years and decades. Imagine 2 young people starting their careers at age 25. One applies these principles imperfectly but consistently. The other ignores them. By age 30, the differences might be modest. The first person has a slightly better reputation, slightly more savings, slightly better skills. But by age 40, the differences have grown substantially. The first person has built strong professional relationships, has significant investments growing, has developed valuable expertise, has a reputation for excellence. The second person is still struggling with the same problems they had at 25. By age 55, the first person has achieved genuine prosperity, financial security, strong relationships, good health, peace of mind. The second is still struggling, wondering why life has been unfair to them, not realizing that they've been violating fundamental laws for 3 decades. The key word is consistency. These principles must be applied consistently over long periods to produce their full effect. Providing excellent service once doesn't build prosperity, doing it consistently for years does. Saving money 1 month doesn't create wealth, saving consistently for decades does. Being reliable on one project doesn't build reputation. Being reliable on hundreds of projects does. This is where many people fail. They apply the principles sporadically, when it's convenient, or when they feel motivated. But real prosperity comes from making these principles so deeply integrated into your character that you live them automatically, regardless of circumstances or feelings. Babson would encourage you to see these principles not as burdens, but as liberating truths. They free you from depending on luck, on being in the right place at the right time, on having the right connections or advantages. Yes, those things help, but they're not essential. What's essential is your consistent application of fundamental principles. This puts your destiny in your own hands. You become the primary author of your prosperity. Moreover, prosperity built on these principles is sustainable and satisfying in ways that prosperity obtained through other means never can be. When you know your prosperity comes from genuine service, from integrity, from developing real capabilities, from providing actual value, you can enjoy it without guilt or anxiety. You know you earned it through principles that will continue to serve you. Your prosperity isn't dependent on maintaining deceptions, on exploiting others, or on luck that might change. It's built on solid foundation that will support you through changing circumstances. Please like and subscribe to Audiobook Library. It really helps the channel to grow and allows us to bring you more transformative content like this. Your support enables us to continue creating these detailed summaries that can genuinely impact your life and your path to prosperity. As we conclude this exploration of Roger Ward Babson's Fundamentals of Prosperity, let's remember that these aren't merely interesting ideas to consider abstractly. These are practical principles to implement immediately in your daily life. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, you have an opportunity to bring greater service and enthusiasm to your work. You have an opportunity to make a financial decision based on economy and wisdom rather than impulse. You have an opportunity to keep a commitment, even if it's inconvenient, building your reliability. You have an opportunity to persevere with something difficult rather than quitting. You have an opportunity to learn something new, to cooperate generously with someone, to act with integrity even when dishonesty would be easier. Each of these small decisions seems insignificant in the moment. But remember, prosperity isn't built in grand gestures and dramatic moments, though those can play a part. Real prosperity is built in the accumulated decisions of ordinary days, in the consistent application of fundamental principles hour by hour, day by day, year by year. The person who understands this and lives accordingly will prosper inevitably, as surely as a planted seed grows when given proper care. Babson's work reminds us that prosperity is not mysterious or magical. It follows laws as predictable as any natural law. Understand these laws, align your life with them, apply them consistently, and prosperity will come. It may not come as quickly as you hope. It may require more patience and perseverance than you anticipated, but it will come as naturally and inevitably as spring follows winter. Your prosperity isn't just about you. When you prosper through these principles, you inevitably lift others as well. Your excellent service benefits those you serve. Your reliability makes you someone others can depend on. Your enthusiasm inspires those around you. Your cooperation strengthens your community. Your integrity raises the ethical standards of everyone who interacts with you. Your generosity directly helps others. Your perseverance encourages those who are struggling. When you prosper through right principles, you become a force for good in the world, creating ripples of positive impact far beyond just your own life. So begin today, not tomorrow, not when circumstances are more favorable, not when you feel more ready. Begin today with whatever situation you find yourself in, applying whatever principles you can. If you're in a job you don't particularly enjoy, bring enthusiastic service to it anyway. If money is tight, practice economy and begin saving something, even if it's a small amount. If you've been unreliable, start keeping your commitments absolutely. If you've been acting from selfishness, begin cooperating more generously. If you've cut ethical corners, return to integrity. If you've been ready to quit, decide to persevere. If you've stopped learning, begin again. If you've lacked clear purpose, take time to develop your vision. Remember that you're not aiming for perfection, you're aiming for consistent direction. You'll make mistakes, you'll have setbacks. You'll occasionally violate these principles despite your best intentions. That's part of being human. What matters is the overall direction of your life, the consistent effort to align with these fundamental laws. Each day is a new opportunity to do better, to apply these principles more fully, to build prosperity one wise decision at a time. The prosperity that awaits you through living these principles is richer and more satisfying than you might imagine. It's not just about money, though financial security is part of it. It's about becoming the kind of person you respect, living with integrity and purpose, building strong relationships, making meaningful contributions, enjoying peace of mind, and having the resources to support yourself and help others. It's about creating a life that's genuinely good, that you can look back on with satisfaction, that matters to others as well as yourself. This is the prosperity Roger Ward Babson described. Prosperity built on unshakable foundation of fundamental principles. Prosperity that grows deeper and more secure over time rather than proving illusory. Prosperity that enriches not just your bank account, but your entire life. This prosperity is available to you. The principles are clear, the path is open, and the choice is yours. Thank you for listening to this detailed exploration of the fundamentals of prosperity. If you found this valuable, please check out our other videos in the audiobook library, where we offer similar in-depth summaries of transformative books that can help you build the prosperous, meaningful life you desire. Each video is crafted to give you practical wisdom you can apply immediately to improve your circumstances and achieve your goals. Browse through our video library and discover the knowledge that will propel you toward the prosperity and success you